Hi, everyone. My name is Mel Robertson, and I want to welcome you to the Dare to Dream Bigger Summit, where you're going to learn how to harness the power of creation, get clear about your desires, and bring your biggest dream into reality. Today, I have an amazing expert in store for you, and her name is Krystalya Marie. And I want to tell you a little bit about why I chose her and why I think you're going to love her. I chose Krystalya because she has the tools and strategies for awakening and creating the life you deserve and desire. And I feel that you're really going to love her because she's going to show you how easy it is to love yourself and build the foundation you need to bring your biggest dream into reality. Welcome, Krystalya.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm happy to be here, Mel.
And would you mind sharing a little bit about your journey with our audience?
Sure, I'd love to do that. So I probably grew up in what we would call a dysfunctional family, which most of us do in some way, shape, or form. But we didn't really recognize it as dysfunctional. But as I got into my adult relationships, my first husband and so on, I found myself in some very abusive relationships. I left my marriage and I got into another relationship, and the guy that I was dating ended up beating me up and stabbing me with one of my kitchen knives.
Mm.
And the truth of the matter is, the wound itself was nothing like the violation and the abusive side of it. And I was really fortunate that I had a therapist that said to me, this is not just about him and blaming him, but it's about you starting to build your self esteem, build your self worth.
Yeah.
And I worked with him for 13 years. And at the end of the 13 years, yes, things were better. But I ended up in another marriage that wasn't anywhere near physical abuse, but it still was abusive in its own ways.
Mm.
And so, you know, I realized that more had to happen here. And I was fortunate enough that in 2000, I met this woman who became my teacher and mentor. And I worked with her. But the fun part was the first time I met her at a live event, she said, who's healed something in their life that they feel really powerfully that they've healed? I raised my hand. She said, so what do you think you've healed? And I said, my self love and self worth. Because I'd worked on it for years. I did the affirmations in the mirror, all this stuff. And she's like, come on up front. And she did this thing called muscle checking, which is basically checking the strength of your arm or a muscle to see if it's positive or negative. And I like to say I failed miserably when she had me say, I love myself
Mm.
unconditionally. And so she taught me a process and I worked on that, and that's how really shifted my life. And then in 2002, my life was really challenged when I found a lump the size of a golf ball in one of my breasts. And I did everything I'd learned from her and her healing work and went to all these healers. And one day, this medical intuitive said to me, you need to draw those images floating in your aura. And I clearly remember doing the rolling my eye. Yeah, right, whatever. I'm a computer person. No, I don't do drawing symbols. And a couple days later, started seeing images and ended up being guided to use one to remove the lump from my breast.
Mm-hmm.
And it was gone in 20 minutes. So,
Now it's interesting, you when you got the message that you listened right away, and I know for me personally, a lot of times when I hear messages, I don't listen right away. How did you hear it and take action?
well, I had dismissed Reiki because of images. The woman that I studied under, my mentor, she had images in her book, which kind of woke me up to the idea of images. But then I thought she was going to be the symbol lady, right? Not me. So I guess it was kind of like what I call that third thing that has to hit you over the head. And when that woman said it, I still didn't believe it. But when I went into meditation, I started seeing flashes of images, and I said, I really need to draw these. It's something to this. So
Mm.
Spirit has an interesting way of leading us. So I wouldn't say, I'd say it took a process of several years, really. But
Mm-hmm.
but at that point, when I started seeing them in the meditation, how could I ignore that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's really amazing that you were able to take that information and act on it right away and then be able to share it with us.
Right.
What are a few simple tips our listeners can begin to do right away to begin building their self esteem and self worth and self love?
Well, I think one of the first things you want to do is start making a plan of something you're going to do for yourself every day.
Hmm.
And that's really key to just affirming that you want to love yourself
Yeah.
totally. So, things like for moms out there, as an example, so often as mothers, we think we have to take care of our husband and our children and, all the stuff. And if we're working outside the home as well, it's just overwhelm. But if we don't take care of us, we are never going to really be able to help them. And we're teaching them not to love themselves as well.
Mm-hmm.
So taking a few minutes, even if it's that hot, the warm bath with a little candlelight and a glass of wine or whatever nurtures your soul a bit at the end of the day, even hang a sign on the door and say, guys, it's my turn. And the other piece is I think we need this all. This is all of us. We need to be able to ask for help, not just
Mm-hmm.
assume that everybody's too busy to help us because other people can help us. And if we just do those two things, and I've got lots of other tips, but if we just do those two things, it gets us started on the path, which is I think what you asked me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was given an exercise to actually think about my self-love as a bank account. And doing the exercise as I'm making deposits, and when I'm giving, I'm making withdrawals. So to make sure that I'm depositing more than I'm withdrawing. And that's been a really
Right.
good image for me. And it's such a huge difference. Even if we just take 5 minutes, it doesn't have to be a huge thing, but even 5 minutes to just quiet down and just listen inside of ourselves for a minute and just check in and say, hi, how are you? You know?
Yeah, well, my mother, when I grew up, I remember her clearly saying the only time she had time for herself is if she got sick
Hmm.
or went to the hospital. And I'm like, I don't want to do that.
No.
That doesn't sound like a good way to get a break. We need to do it every day.
Yeah, I was finding for myself that by not taking care of myself and giving, that months down the road, then I would finally like get to this point where I would just explode and wouldn't be able to take it anymore, and it would be like,
Right.
well, if I would just start taking care of myself and stop giving so much to everybody else and listen to what's going on inside me, I can make decisions that are best for me and feel good about what I'm doing.
Well, not only that, but when you start to give to yourself, you actually have more energy to
Yes.
give to others because you are filled. It's like you can't run the car and get anywhere without the gasoline
Right.
in it. So how are
Mhm.
you going to help somebody else if you didn't fill up yourself first?
Yeah. And we think that by taking the extra time, we're not going to have the time or it's going to make us more tired. And from my personal experience, just even taking the chance to get up just a few minutes earlier so I have those few minutes with myself, it does give you more energy. You do feel more empowered, more alive, and more excited. And you do have more energy. You're like, wow, how could I do this when I didn't think I could do it yesterday?
Right, right. That's a very good point. It's really a good point. And I think the other piece we might want to talk a bit about is our beliefs and how we get there. So whenever you want to talk about that, just let
No,
me
I think that's a great segue. I think beliefs, our belief systems, the underlying belief systems that run on autopilot that we're not even aware of, are keeping these perpetual habits in place.
Yeah, well, I heard you say, getting up a few minutes early. If we take on the belief that getting up a few minutes early, we're just going to be more exhausted, it's not going to help.
Right.
But but you took on the belief that you're going to have more energy and you'll have a little space for you
Mm.
get your day started. And that's just the idea of setting intention at the beginning of the day, just taking those few minutes is really, really powerful. It's
Hmm.
very powerful. And back to our belief thing, most of us, as you said, we're on autopilot, but we are totally unaware of those beliefs that are
Hmm.
keeping us on autopilot. We didn't decide to take those beliefs on. We might have subconsciously, but on a conscious level, if we were to look at every belief that we do and everything we do, we would probably question most of it.
Hmm.
And for me, what happened was this going back to the whole self love thing is what she discovered when she was doing that muscle checking back to that example was that I had an underlying belief that God was going to punish me if I loved myself.
Mm.
So all the affirmations of standing in front of the mirror and staring and telling myself I love myself, right? Which is all great stuff. But underneath it's like, right, you don't think you really want to love yourself because God's going to punish you if you do that. Now, I'm not saying the religious thing taught me that. I took that belief on for whatever reason. Who
Hmm.
knows? what was said to me. And that's the other piece. Two children can hear the exact same thing, be told the same thing, and they take on a totally different belief in their life.
Mm-hmm.
And so there I was. Here's this belief: God's going to punish me if I love myself. So what I ended up doing was learning her technique, and then my own methods. It increase the speed, or help it happen faster, but learned how to bridge that belief. So you have to take care of that belief to move to the next belief, to move to the next belief. Just like children, when we learn to walk, we don't stand up and run. We learn to like crawl and pull ourselves up, all of the steps before we got to run. And it's the same thing with our beliefs. And I think that's one of the biggest things I see missing today with most of the people out there that are teaching affirmations. They're teaching affirmations, but they're not getting people to that core level.
And another thing that I notice is that people feel like with beliefs that if it's an old belief, we need to go back and dig it up and find out how it got there and what brought it there and how am I going to resolve it. And the reality is we just need to know where we are so we know where we're going. We don't need to go dig it up and figure out how we got there. We just need to know we have the belief and how are we going to move forward.
Yeah, I agree. There has been times where I ended up in a dream going back to understand it, and that's perfectly fine, but I agree you don't have to go back there and dig it all up. Just figure out what the underlying core belief is. And simple things like learning muscle checking and asking yourself, I start out as an example. Let's use the self-love. If I said, I love myself totally, and I don't test positive, okay, I'm negative here, then go back. Do I desire to love myself even? Do I think I deserve to love myself? And ask those questions, and you can gradually move backward and figure it out if you want to do it that way. So there's a lot of different little techniques like that you can use to kind of find those underlying beliefs.
So for our viewers at home that have never done muscle testing before, can you do an example of how someone could test on themselves?
Yeah, let me just show it here if I can get my hands in the right position. Okay, so you basically want to make sure, first of all, you just intend that you're totally clear and that you are intending for spirit to give you the answer. You don't want to already have the answer in mind because you're going to get bad results. You also want to be hydrated. You link your fingers, make a circle here, link the fingers together, so you're kind of like that, and you say, I love myself totally and completely, and you pull hard on it, and if it comes apart, it's a no, and if it's strong, it's a yes. So you can see mine is strong with saying that. So that gives you an idea how you can do that. On my website, there's many more examples. I have a whole report giving people different ones because that method doesn't work for everybody, so there's several different methods. One easy one is to rub your fingers together like this, and if it gets sticky, it's a no, and if it's smooth, it's a yes.
I haven't heard that one before. I like that one.
Yeah, and that works for some people, and it doesn't work for others as well.
Well, thanks so much for sharing that.
Sure.
Now, this summit is about daring to dream bigger and bringing your biggest dream into fruition. And so I want to talk about what's the biggest dream to date so far that you've brought into fruition for yourself? And what was that creation process like for you?
Well, I would say my biggest dream so far, actually, this is kind of an interesting one. I lost all of my money in 2005. And I still had my house. And my big dream at the end of that year was to not have my house go into foreclosure, to somehow resolve that without it going into foreclosure. I have lots of other big dreams, but this one was kind of unique because I have no money. I have no idea how I'm going to make the next house payment. And I am not going into foreclosure. And somehow I'm going to end up with cash in my pocket when this is all done. So I put my house up for sale. My realtor called me, and the one I used to have that sold me the house, and said, there's no way you're getting that much money for the house. Okay. And I said, just watch me. And he's like, you're crazy. And I was putting it up for $225,000 for sale by owner. And the realtor said, 208 is the most I would list it for. And I'm like, great, I'm not listing with you. So it didn't sell right away, so I kept intending that this happened, and money would just show up and make the house payment, right? Sure. And I lived on eggs and tomatoes for that whole year. That was my total meal. But I would be like intending that this would happen. So I ended up a couple months into it. I went ahead and reached out to a realtor and I said, okay, this is what I want to list it for. And I raised the price at that point by $10,000. That would cover the real estate commissions, right? That was
Absolutely.
my logic. So, but this was all very spiritually guided. And I think that's really the key is listening to what Spirit's telling you to do. So I did that, and the realtor was real hesitant, but he's like, okay, that's what we'll start with. And he's thinking we're going to lower it soon, you know them. So pretty soon, it hasn't sold. A month or so later, I called him up. I said, we're going to raise the price by 10,000 more. Now he thinks I've lost my mind, right? But he does it anyway. And I end up getting a free trip to Australia. I go away for a whole month to Australia. Meanwhile, my house, everything's getting covered, and I have no idea where the money's coming from. It's just showing up. Long story short, we got to October. Now, this started in January. We're now in October, and I'm like, Spirit, something has to happen here. What do you want me to do? And they said, raise the price to $277. I'm like, really? And I heard yes, so I called the realtor, and they sent me the paperwork. It said $267. I actually had to cross it off and change it to $277. Within a week of changing that price, I sold it for cash for $265,000.
Awesome.
So that gives you an idea of how staying in the flow, listening to your guidance, listening to that intuition can make a huge difference because nobody raises the price of their house when they're in panic mode, right?
No.
And I somehow just knew to keep trusting. So I've manifested many other goals, but I think that story just really shows how, we can be in so much fear because I certainly was. When I first did it, I was like, oh my God. And, but we can get in a lot of fear, and it's learning to move from that fear and knowing to trust your inner guidance.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks so much for sharing that.
You're welcome.
So, a lot of us have practiced manifestation technique after manifestation technique, not getting the results we want. Why is it that manifestation techniques don't alone work for people?
I think there's a few issues. First of all, we're not dealing with those unconscious mind chatter things we talked about. We're not getting to that core belief. And we aren't really implementing all the strategies. Like in Think and Grow Rich, as an example, there's 13 basic steps to the whole thing. And we're implementing part of them. Like we don't do a vision board, or we don't do our creative visualization. You don't have to do it exactly that way, but you need to have all those components so that you are totally in alignment with what it is you want. If you're, like, I'll use the example, if you're like homeless, as an example, and you can't start to visualize yourself as having the home you want and keep intending that, but you keep focused on where you're at today, you're never going to get from here to here.
Right.
And that seems to be one of the challenges. The other thing is, when we're doing our affirmations, how much energy are you putting into it? Do you really have this kind of mind or chatter going on here? Yeah, right, that's not true. That's not true. So things like even our affirmations aren't that powerful in a lot of cases. And I'll use the example that I share with that I got intuitively years ago, and that is, so many people say, I love myself unconditionally. So if you're using the on word and you're using something conditional, you're programming yourself for conditional love right then and there. And if you just change the wording, I love myself totally and completely, it's a major difference in the energy of it, and it'll make a huge difference. If you go out and you just scream your affirmations out there, really get into it, it makes a huge difference. So it's mostly the energy of where you are and how you want to move yourself forward. And if you're hanging on to and seeing yourself where you are today all the time, you're going to never get to where you want to be. You have to keep seeing yourself over there already, because it's already done if you just get to know it is done.
Excellent. So I understand that you have a free gift for our audience today to help them bringing their biggest dreams into reality. Do you want to tell them a little more about that?
Well, since we're talking about self-love, the gift I'm giving everyone today is one for attracting more love into your life. And the reason that's important is it's not just about loving yourself, although you can use this tool for that, but also starting to attract loving, supportive people in your life to be there and reflect these positive beliefs you're putting out to the
Mm.
world. If everybody we have around us is negative, they're going to pull us that way
Mm-hmm.
versus keeping us on the path of that positive thinking. So I felt that was really an important thing. And
Mm.
so it's an audio program along with some of my symbols, so you get to
Okay.
experience some of those as well.
Oh, wonderful. Thanks so much for sharing that.
You're welcome. You're
Mm.
welcome.
And I want to thank you so much for being a part of this Dare to Dream Bigger Summit. And just wanted to ask, did you have any parting words of wisdom for our guests?
Mel, I think the words of wisdom I would like to share with our guests is just make sure that you take that moment every day
Mm-hmm.
and really honor yourself to love yourself totally and completely.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for being a part of this. It's
Oh,
been
thank
wonderful.
you.